Hey,
Episode 19, baby.
baby.
Baby. How are you, Mim?
Yeah, I'm good. What about you?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. It's Halloween week.
I know. I feel like a bit of a sucker because I'm not really that great at dressing up or having the will to dress up. But I see all these other people online, yourself included, really putting the effort in, and I wish I was that person.
I just love it. I just love fancy dress more than life itself. And I don't like horror fancy dress. I like I like making fun of myself. Like I'm not someone who's going to dress sexy for Halloween.
No.
You're not going to find me doing that. I want to be maybe a little bit ironic, a little bit funny, something that not normally like girls would go as, or like the boy version that's not like got.
I mean, you did do the devil. You did kind of sexy devil makeup. Like, it wasn't a body shot, but it was definitely like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, sexy devil.
Well, I think that's probably like the closest I'll go. I'd say that was more. It was more of like a makeup. It was a makeup look, you know.
Yeah. That was glitter.
But yeah, so I like it to be a bit about makeup or something like that, rather than like some like sexy outfit. But you know what? It leads me swiftly on to my fashion story.
Ooh, take it away.
Because it's Halloween, and obviously no one should be going to Halloween parties at the moment, unless there's 6 people and you're not in tiers 2 or 3.
It'll just be like it'll be like a link up in the supermarket aisle. See you at 8 in Sainsbury's, 31st of October, guys.
Yeah. Well, myself and my flatmate, we are having a Halloween party, but when I say party, it's just the 2 of us. So yeah, I was going to ask you, what are you dressing up for Halloween? If you are, and if you aren't, what would you have dressed up for Halloween?
Oh God. Okay, so I have been toying with the idea of doing some like little spooky little thing in the house. But that's as far as my thoughts have gone. It's just like, should I? I do have a cute little like pump. I have like what they call like those tea light candle things, and one's a pumpkin, one's a cat, and one's a little scary ghost. And I have those burning for the past week to, you know, set the mood, the scary mood. In terms of dress up, I haven't given any thought to. So maybe I think I would want to do like recreate an iconic music video, because I love those ones. I might do Whitney Houston, The Bodyguard.
Ooh.
I might like, you know, out in the forest, like in the snow. I might do, oh God, I think like Dolly Parton would be great.
Oh, I would love to do Dolly, but I think you need to spend some top dollar on a costume. Like
rhinestones ain't cheap.
No, well, as Dolly famously says, it costs a lot of money to look this cheap.
I know. Who else do I think is great? I recently saw on Instagram there's this like American artist called Sweetie, and she recreated Bootylicious, Destiny's Child music video.
Amazing.
But she played all 3, like Michelle, Beyonce, Kelly. The outfits are like on point. Like Miss Tina must have like restitched them for her. So something along those lines. I love those ones. I think they're like timeless and they're funny as well.
Yeah, I like that. What
about you?
Well, considering I am dressing up for Halloween this year, I'm going for like, it's mainly driven by makeup, as I said before. So I'm doing, I can't think of her surname, but the girl Violet from Willy Wonka, who had the blueberry explode in her face. So I'm going to I found this makeup look where you just like have like a little blue explosion. Just need to take a photo with like a bubble. God. But yeah, it's really easy. I have a confession to make. It's whether I keep them, which is cheeky of me that I might wear them but send them back. I've bought some joggers.
Oh, like trackies?
Yeah. for this outfit, because she basically wears like blue trackies. So I was like, okay, if they're for a costume, like...
Oh, I thought this was like a change of heart. Like,
so, no, but I might keep them if they're really great, and also if I spill something on them and can't return them. They were cheap or whatever, but I'm aware that I will always wear them. Like, I'm aware of it.
You won't wear them as much because I have trackies and I've got my velour ones on. These are my trusty, like, mink coloured. I've had these a while and I wear them a lot. But when I leave the house, I actually put on real clothes.
But I think I've got less respect for myself than you do.
I don't know where you...
Because I leave the house in some dangerous clothes. Mainly out of like, so at the moment, this is a really boring story, but the parking outside my flat is an absolute diabolical nightmare. So if like in the evening, or if I've been somewhere and I come back and there's not a parking spot, you can park sort of on the yellow line until like 8:30 in the morning. So I literally normally
you just jump
roll out of bed, I throw a coat on, and I'll be wearing my pajamas underneath. I have to park my car like a 5-minute walk away from my flat, and just have no shame. Sometimes I'm in my dressing gown, sometimes I'm in my coat. I never look great. There's jazzy pajamas poking out. So I think joggers might help those scenarios.
Definitely. I think with joggers, the key, for me at least, I like a matching set. Don't get me wrong, I don't really have many of those, but I think they can make you look like at least you showered and you put something together. But yeah, welcome to the club.
Well, I'll update you guys. I know it's really exciting if I keep them. But yeah, so that my outfit's pretty comfy. I also wanted something where I just didn't want to feel really wasteful of like buying an outfit just to wear it once. So I kind of tried to do a costume where I thought, well, if I spill stuff down it and like it, I'll keep, but like the top and the bottoms. It's not a matching set, but I think I'd wear the stuff again. But yeah, please don't report me to ASOS.
It's fine, don't worry about it.
What is
my fashion story?
Yeah.
So mine is, you know, the travel luggage company, the really expensive guys, Rimowa.
Oh.
They are coming out with a personal, small, quote unquote, handbag version of their luggage. It's like is it like a little trunk? Yeah, they're coming out with one of those.
Like there aren't enough trunks on the market.
I mean, at a time when we're not traveling,
it's innovative.
Not buying their big ones. I'm sure that this idea was on the cards from like last year, and they were developing and designing it and whatever. But they're coming out with a small personal version. That's what they call it. Yeah. Quote unquote personal.
Cool.
And I would love to know how much it's going to cost. You know?
Well, those suitcase sort of frame bags are really expensive to produce. Like they have to be like hand done on a block. And that's crazy expensive. Like I've worked at maybe 2 companies where we've done suitcase style mini trunks, and one company, it was like the top of their price point. It was their most expensive bag in the end because of it. I think it retailed for like over maybe like 1,200 or something like that. And they had bags ranging from sort of like 650, 550 upwards. So it was right at the top of the spectrum. So it's quite like a handmade sort of item, but that suits their brand, to be honest. And I don't know, but cool. I like that.
I mean, they've got like a case for your watches that cost 1,600 euros. So, you know, but it'll be cute. I mean, they'll pull it off. People are going to go, you know, batshit crazy for it, I think. And then, so when I was doing some homework on this, I learned that their CEO is 28. He is the son of, you know, LVMH God. And when his father bought a majority stake in Rimowa, he put him as the CEO at like 26 or something. Can you believe?
That's a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibility at 26.
It is, but I think when you grow up in a dynasty, you are positioned to be like, come under my wing, son, from like 16,
join the family
17,
business.
18, and learn how to lead a business. But for the past few years, Rimowa has had all those collaborations, like didn't they have a Fendi one? Am I making this up? They had a couple collaborations with other brands, and I mean that seemed to be really popular. So he must be doing something right, you know. He's got his ear to the street, I suppose.
Yeah, and hopefully you sort of learned from the big boss daddy.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for these little trunk. I don't know how little they're
little
going to be, to be
babies.
honest. Yeah, those little baby ones. So that's my fashion story.
We interrupt this broadcast to remind you, go follow us on Instagram, StyleOverSubstancePod. Shoot us an email, styleoversubstancepeak@gmail.com. Find us on YouTube, find us on Twitter. We've got all the links on our Instagram. You know what to do.
But this week, we are going back to another story time, and this week is yours, Scarlett.
It is mine. And you just reminded me of the fact that I still need to share another one, but that is not a time today. You just reminded me of the Bentley to the yacht story.
That's my favourite quote.
But it's quite a short one, so if this story time doesn't end up being super long, maybe I'll add it at the end. So yeah, this is one of like my first work trips that I'm going to tell you about. It might even be the first where I wasn't being a human courier. So the first where I actually had something to do at the other side. So yeah, welcome to Scarlett's first work trip. So it was a solo work trip. I'm going to set the scene. I was working at a company, and we had designed and created these sort of fuzzy accessories, and we had made the prototypes ourselves in the studio. And basically, I think beforehand there wasn't sort of enough sort of appeal for those accessories, that I think they were either just such small quantities that even the orders could have been made in-house. Or something, or they were made by somebody but who we were no longer working with. But basically I had sort of adjusted a pattern to basically make it how everyone was happy with, and then it had like different bits sewn on it, and it was sort of this little fuzzy accessory, very sort of Fendi-esque. But
was it a key ring, or are we talking about okay that's so cute.
Just like
I love
a bag
those.
accessory. They were great, they were really, really cool. And so I'd spent like an entire day sort of making our samples and all of that, and for the next season. But this prior season sort of production was needing to start, and the materials were arriving at the factory. Apologies everybody, they were made of fur, so I'm going to refer to fur. So yeah, all the materials were being made supplied to the factory, so the production needed to start, and my job was to go and teach the factory how to make these accessories.
Oh God.
Bearing in mind at this point, I'm not an employee. I believe I was still an intern or something like that.
Oh.
I mean, like I for all intents and purposes, I was basically an employee, but like I was not full staff. Like I was still like this little Scarlet.
But I'm sure at the time you were thinking, I'm just an intern and I get to go on a trip.
Oh, for sure. I was like, and also I really like traveling. Like I quite enjoy planes and all of that stuff. Like that doesn't
it's a break from the routine, and it makes it more exciting.
It's a day out of the office. Like I used to love actually being sent on errands because it meant like the day went faster and stuff like that. Like you kind of just got, and also you just got to try and see like the best of certain things. So basically we were working with a factory in Europe, and obviously their first language was not English. So I was very nervous about how that was going to happen. And the way it came about was that I think we'd sent them our patterns, but they had, like, we'd literally sent them like a little cardboard pattern of what they needed to do. But they were very sort of bloody minded. And so I had to go and hand deliver a human courier style some of the accessories that they needed to put on. We had posted them some, but they claimed they hadn't got it. Well, our DHL told us they got it, but we thought, you know what, it's an inexpensive item. We've got more. Let's take it over and teach them how to make these, because I think they were quite popular at the time. And also, you know, we want them made properly. And when you're working with fur, like, you don't want people to waste it. Like there's a real, you know, you've got to handle fur correctly and you don't want wastage. And
it's an expensive material. It's not cheap.
Exactly. It's not cheap. So I fly like first thing, Wizz Air.
Oh,
classic.
I feel like I've been on Wizz Air. Isn't it like an Eastern European? Like...
I think it might be Hungarian.
Yeah.
Hungary's answer to Ryanair, basically.
Yeah,
but not as bad as Ryanair.
I will fly Ryanair.
No, but it's not got the hidden costs that Ryanair has at every turnstile. So yeah, wake up at the crack of dawn to get the 7 a.m. flight out to the factory. I get met at the airport by the factory owner, and we have like at least an hour's drive into the countryside to the factory. So I'm just like sat in this dude's car whilst he's driving like a maniac. Never met him before. And just like,
where are you taking me?
Just like also kind of bewildered. And like, you know what it's like when it's kind of, it's not great countryside because you're going into an industrial section, so it's not like there's loads necessarily to see, and it was like winter and like the weather wasn't great, and
you know what stuff. As you said all that I'm gonna remind you of a trip we took to Milan.
I know. Just in a car with a stranger thinking, I swear I've been taught not to do this.
Yeah, and there was a part where someone made a joke about like killing us and like, and, like getting dumped in the middle of like the Swiss mountains or some shit.
You were just like, they're like,
God. You're like, funny joke.
But don't do that.
Yeah. Okay, carry on.
My life was in this man's hands. And we get to the factories, and it's really interesting, like seeing the factory. It's the first time I've seen the factories or a factory, and I get shown around and all of that stuff. And then I'm just like, okay, so should we? And I had a few questions maybe also to answer on certain things. And I was like, you know, should we get started with this? Like, we don't know how long it's going to take. And obviously I've got to fly back that day because God forbid I would get a hotel and stay there. So we had like, by the time you have to get back to the airport, so I think the flight out would have been maybe at like 7 as well. So by the time it's an hour's drive there and all of that stuff, there's not much time. I then get in this room with an average age of women must have maybe been 70.
Okay.
And they're going to learn how to make this accessory.
Oh, okay.
So I'm there probably like 21. Don't know the language they speak because it wasn't even the language of the country we were in. Not that I knew that language anyway. So I then had to say it to the factory owner's wife, who would then translate it to these women. And I felt like the most obnoxious young girl trying to teach these women how to make something that, I'm not being funny, if I've managed it, like, that's their actual job. Like, their profession is creating and making accessories. But the problem is that we'd given them a pattern, And basically what we were making were like little pom-poms or balls, essentially. And we made that out of a square. And so you sew all around the outside of the square, and then you stuff it and you drawstring it, and it creates a nice ball. But their rationale was, well, it's a round object, so the pattern should be round. It should be a circle. But they had based the circle off of our square. So they'd basically like cut all the corners off of our square to make it circular. Yeah. And they'd cut out all of the fur, but then they were too small for the size because they'd cut off all of that. And also it doesn't need to be round to make it a ball.
Spherical, yeah.
And so I was having to argue with this man and all these ladies over the fact that they'd cut it all out wrong, and why hadn't they followed the pattern, despite feeling like I've got no authority in a room and I'm not naturally a confrontational person, and also trying to sort of remain what I think is professional. Yeah. So I'm just there like, oh my God, what is going on? Like having sort of like that outer body moment where you sort of look in a room where I'm just surrounded by like 70-year-old women who don't speak the same language. I'm having to tell them off because they haven't followed my instructions, but try and then teach them anyway how to make these things. And it was just so embarrassing having to like be like, and then we sew this bit and then wait for the ladies to sort of like do it. And I had to like show and tell sort of in front of them.
Oh my God.
And let's be honest, if their craft is making things, they're probably a much more of a dab hand at sewing than I am.
They would probably went back to the tea room after the session.
They were 100% and was like, bitching about me.
They were just like, how cute this young lady comes here and tells us how to make a ball. Oh, but she did such a lovely job. She did. Yes, she did. And
it wouldn't have been. It would have been the nerve that girl had of trying to tell us how to make this. I just could tell, I could see their faces. They were all sort of murmuring to each other. And I was just there like, are you serious? And then while we were there doing this fabulous tutorial, it starts snowing outside and quite heavily. So then the factory owner's like, I think we need to head off to the airport. Like,
oh God,
we don't want you to get like stuck, and because of the snow the traffic's going to be bad and blah 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 blah. I can't have even been there for more than 2 hours.
Oh God.
And had to then just drive that hour back to the airport with this man, and like we did in Milan, trusting strangers with our lives, I fell asleep in the car, which is
he could have driven past the airport
anywhere. I mean, we knew him in terms of he was a factory owner, but like I didn't know him. And also I don't fall asleep with like some of my friends because I don't think that's always like very nice to fall asleep in front of people. Like you want to keep them company if they're driving or something like that. But I was just exhausted from this like draining day, having been up at like 4, trying to like not be the biggest dick in the world to these women. So then like drive back after it not even really being a long enough time to see if they've made the pom-poms properly.
But that's the thing, like it's so tight of them, let's be frank, so tight for you to do some like quick turnaround trip like that in a day. Like they could have put you in a Premier Inn, like I know the European version or wherever you are.
I'm pretty sure the factory owners would have let me stay at their house. Like, do you know what I mean? They're those sorts of people.
Well, not that I would want that. That's the thing you should be worrying about.
I feel like they were like, oh, why don't you just stay? Like, you can go out with our daughter. Like, you can go out like clubbing or something like that.
Oh God, that sounds like my parents trying to convince me to like go out with one of my school friends. Like, oh, you know that friend of yours? She's lovely. You should go out with her or something. Oh, mate, I don't need a play date.
They were making a play date for me and the daughter. I was like, oh, no, I've got to get back. I think it was maybe like a Friday or something like that. So they were like, you know, you should like stay for the weekend, like come stay or whatever. And I was like, well, I've got a flight back. But yeah, the really sad thing is, obviously money is tight and you don't want to have that added expense of staying overnight. But let's be honest, the most that's ever going to be is like 50-60 quid.
Yeah.
And I know that can add up,
but not really.
You also have to sort of weigh up, like, was I able to get much done?
Mm-hmm.
Did I have to wake up at X time, and like all of that kind of a thing? And how long has then my working day been? And I guess also then you have maybe some more food costs if someone stays there like longer and all of that stuff.
But it's what they could have done, which is what we used to try and blag in my old role, is like, how can we get a 2-day, 1-night trip out of the company? So you would think, let's plan multiple objectives for the weekend or for the time that you're in that other country, and you say, okay, we're going to train these older ladies how to make pom-poms, out of fur or whatever, but let's also go and see how they run the factory, see if it's, a contact or a supplier that we want to continue having. And then they just task you with other stuff to do while you're out there to make it worth their while. Because, I mean, that's cheaper than doing 2 separate trips.
Exactly.
But yeah, in fashion, you always want to blag those trips because, let's be honest, those are the nice perks.
At the moment, that's what I'm missing most, is just kind of a regular travel. I mean, I'm obviously not traveling anywhere. But yeah, it was just crazy. And then, like, in a stark contrast, then the last trip I did with that company was 2 weeks long.
Oh.
Like,
where did you go for that?
We were in Hungary for a few days and then Italy for the most of it. But yeah, we just visited our factories, launching products, and then just didn't want to rush it. We wanted to like take our time, and yeah, it was over a week, like it was over a weekend and stuff like that. So I got to explore and really enjoy it. And also then you can kind of make the best of it. You work all day at factories and you come back into like the city, into like Florence or something like that. And it's much more enjoyable. But yeah, and also the worst thing as well, when you don't really have any authority and no one's really prepped you. And I wouldn't say I'm necessarily a nervous person, but I like to ask a lot of questions more in preparation of like, so can I tell them this, or am I allowed to make this decision, or do I have to call you for deciding this or whatever? And just the worst thing when you get to a place is that like they ask you a question, you've got to call your boss and be like, they've just asked this, they've cut out all the fur roll, what should we do? Like, oh, they're not even letting me finish my masterclass, I'm on my way back to the airport, what should I do? And it's kind of that thing of, why should those women, like, it just
trust you?
Feels like a little girl's turned up, and like, and of course, like, I shouldn't have had any responsibility then. And obviously the later trip I had more responsibility and was able to sign off on things and was there with like my correct team to make all the decisions there and then, that we weren't picking up the phone. But yeah, it was crazy. It was such a weird thing that it was like my first thing. I remember my parents being like, wow, they must really trust you to do that. And I was like, it's because they've got nobody else. And it's because I'm disposable. Like, as in, they don't need me every day in the office. Whereas like, if you go in fashion, like obviously you know that like people are pulled so thin with tasks that like, even missing a day sometimes is like not ideal. So yeah, a really glamorous day of
oh god,
liaising with old ladies. And don't get me wrong, I love old ladies. I was more saddened at the fact that obviously these ladies probably shouldn't be working any longer.
Sometimes you just want to keep your brain ticking over at that age. But yeah, I have a question for you. So you were obviously in the office having to design these little bag charms, keychains, whatever. And you're, as a designer, putting things together and seeing how they work to create something that's cute. But I mean, you're not a manufacturer to say that the way you've decided to execute this item is a way that it's going to ensure this keychain is durable and going to last, and it's done with like quality control in mind and stuff. So didn't you feel like nervous to be like, oh yeah, this is just something I tried to like piece together in the office? And This is how you guys need to go on and make like 100 more of these, just like I did with this one.
Yeah, definitely. And also because like we didn't design it in a way to be like mass produced, and not that they were making like hundreds of thousands, but still like even just me making the samples would be like serious work. And also it's quite difficult sewing through leather or sewing through fur. And obviously, I think we only had sewing needles. They probably would have had proper needles. But like it hurts your hands after a while as well. And I know that's their trade and maybe their hands are a bit roughened to it.
Yeah.
But absolutely, because I mean, I hadn't even studied bags, but I'd studied fashion. So I understand how patterns work and all of that stuff. But you're right, like part of what you pay a factory for is to manufacture it so that it doesn't break after the first use or all of that stuff. And that is a really difficult thing because actually in time, and that's why our trips became a lot longer. And also as a company, we realized that that was what to invest in and all of that stuff. And, you know, you've got to plan with foresight rather than having all these last minute trips where you're trying to skimp on money because you're doing it almost in an effort to save money on shipping or something like that. But it should be really collaborative. Like I'm a big believer, I think I've mentioned it before, as a designer, I can have an idea, but it's the manufacturers are the people who've got the skill of how to make it. All of like our learning should come from them, like, and they know so much more than I ever will. And like, it should definitely be like collaborative, which is what it used to be on those sort of 2-week-long trips. As you go, this is what we want to make. This is what like the sketches, and this would happen a lot more with maybe like hardware, where it's got a functionality where I'm not an engineer like or a physicist or like whatever, so I've in my head thought of the best way for it to be, but then so I'll kind of even like sketch how I think the contraction should work or whatever it is, or the hinging or whatever system it has. But then I'm like, but you tell us because this also has this much weight pulling off of it, or
like the mechanics of the design and the logistics. And that's actually
one of the hardest things, is for these people to make, especially like a bag lock. And if you've got a top handle on a bag, there's this pulling action that would rip open like a magnet if the magnet's not super strong. But then you need to have a really strong magnet, your lock has to be a certain size. It's all of this stuff that kind of makes it very difficult to sort of have ornate or different contraptions. Like the amount of times we've had to change a lock on a bag because it's got a top handle and then the flap would just fall open or something like that. It's a nightmare. But the factories probably warn you about that, and it's us being like, no, we want it to work this way. We have to find a solution. You have to find a solution. It's us not listening normally.
That's really interesting. You have to have good relationships with those who's going to make your stuff.
And also I'm like, so that place was very collaborative and really had nice relationships with factories. And then sort of the second place that I went to after that, they just didn't really have any relationship with their factories and chopped and changed them all the time. And I just thought, well, you're never going to get anything good from them. Because actually those things do take time. And unless you're a Chanel or a Gucci or a Fendi and your quantities are high, factories aren't going to pay you loads of time. So actually the best way of getting their attention or getting their hard work is to build a nice relationship, because you're never going to be the main breadwinner for them unless you're like a Chanel or whatever.
But I mean, even those sorts of companies, completely speculation what I'm going to say, but even these other luxury brands, they have designs. They come out with designs and variations of things where they do small runs, like the Chanel bags is someone might have a tweed in a pink and a tweed in a silver or something really unusual, and there's a very small run of them and you may never see anyone else with that variation. So I think that regardless of I think those who are putting in those big orders are like the Primarks of the world. But if you really want something that is going to look amazing and is going to be like so on brand as the Chanel's want something that looks like quintessentially Chanel, then you're going to have to foster and develop that really deep relationship.
Yeah, for sure. Because there's also there's almost like a tone of voice or something like that you can imagine. Like, imagine with marketing, a brand's got a font, it's got a color palette, it's got all of that. And I guess there's the same thing with the thickness of thread, or what colors that you always go back to, and all of that stuff, or a style of stitching, or like all of that stuff. That, like, you know, there's all these different ingredients or recipes that make up a brand. I love all that stuff. Like, it's so interesting, all of that side of things.
Yeah. So traveling as a designer, how many trips did you used to get a year? Or was it just for you, in your experience, you were just like the one who would do the smaller sorts of trips, or ad hoc trips out of, you know, need? Or is it something that designers on a whole do recurringly?
So to begin with, when I was like an intern and design assistant, they would be the more ad hoc. Scarlet, like, something needs to get there. Like, can you go? Is that okay? Like, blah, blah, blah. And I would always be game for that anyway. Like, yeah, I get to go to plane, get to do this, I'm sure. But as you get more senior, and we had quite a small team by the end, and also it's part of your development is that it's a really important thing to be able to speak to the factories and understand how things are made, and it helps you learn more. It's a really regular thing that every time you're launching stuff, you would go, and then maybe you would go back again for like the first proto that they've made. So we used to sort of take like what's called maquettes, so like a little mock-up of a bag or of the style.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
We would then like talk them through like our technical pack of how it's made, and they would tell us if there might be any issues during that time. They'd maybe then show us some solutions for that. They'd show us the mock-up. We'd then sort of know if that's obviously the right size, because paper can only give you so much. And yeah, we do all of that. And so then you'd go back again to see these first protos once they were made. And then we'd give our comments and our tweaks. And then we would maybe go back again for like the final prototype. But often they would also be sent. But we realised it was worth it to go regularly, because you get so much more of it out of the factory. And also they can do stuff there and then whilst you're there, rather than them sending all these protos to you, only to then like email back your comments. Like, it's so much better to do it sort of there, and with,
and you can fully explain yourself.
Yeah. And like, obviously there was a language barrier, but we actually had people who would translate for us, or obviously they'd have some sort of levels of English anyway. But yeah, so then it becomes very often, and I actually really enjoyed that side of things, because I quite like not having sort of an everyday routine job. I think that's a nice thing about especially working in design, is that it's not a 9 to 5 staring at spreadsheets all day sort of a job. It's a very varied job, so it's quite nice to mix it up even more, and it feels like a perk if you're doing it with nice people and that stuff. But don't get me wrong, I've had some pretty boring work trips where you're not that fussed about who you went with, or they've got their own agenda and no people, and you're just kind of like, all right, I'll get dinner alone then, shall I? Cool.
Oh God, you got dinner alone?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't mind stuff like that. But then
also,
you
don't. But still, it's a bit like standoffish. Not for you, but like if they
yeah, but it's probably someone that you don't want to have dinner with either. And
Fair
actually
enough.
like, you know, yes, it would have been fine, but it's not relaxing, you know, when you've had a really long day. So imagine you've been like, wake up and you go to a factory and you're there all day, and you've been with your colleagues all day, and then you come back and you go out for dinner with your colleagues.
That's true. Yeah.
And if you like them, the chat isn't about work, but if you don't really get along that well, it can't help but be about work. And so then you don't ever get to switch off or do the stuff that when you're at work, you forget that you don't see those people all the time, and have all your meals with them and stuff like that. But to be honest, for the most part, I've worked with people where it's been really enjoyable, but every now and then you're kind of like, either with someone super senior where you're like on your best behavior, or like all of that. Yeah, that's my story of me and my old ladies.
Well, I'm sure they remember you just as much as you remember them. Look at that Scarlet, such a bright young girl. Well, that was a really informative story time, actually, for those people who are thinking about design. And I mean, because trips really are what we Devil Wears Prada fantasize about. Yeah,
it's not like the Paris trip in Devil Wears Prada, but also it is expected of you after a certain level. So one of my colleagues actually really hated flying, and so like you do have to be prepared for that. I know some people aren't the biggest fan of like flying, or don't want to leave like their loved ones and all of that stuff for like long spaces of time, or a bit like not wanting to do that. But it is sort of something that you do have to prepare yourself for.
But yeah, guys, thanks again for listening to Style Over Substance. As Scarlett has said before, follow us on Instagram, like our posts somewhere, and give us a 5-star rating. Share this podcast with your friends and family who you think are going to enjoy this. What else we got going on? Yeah, I said the 5-star review. You're not listening.
No.
But thanks again, guys. We will see you next week.